Hello guys, welcome to Semis. Most of you asked me to upload a video on how to answer paper 1 questions in order to score full marks or in order to score more marks. In this video, I'm going to guide you on the things that you're supposed to do and the things that you'd want to avoid when answering paper 1 questions. So, welcome. So, paper 1 has 3 sections. We have the functional writings, 20 marks, the cloze test, 10 marks, and the oral skills, 30 marks. So we're going to major on the 2 areas, functional writings and oral skills, and then the cloze test, you can do it on your own. For you to pass English paper 1, which is the easiest paper to pass or to score more marks, you need to be good at functional writing. You need to get a 15, a 14, a 13 in your functional writing. And I'm going to show you how you can do that. Let's begin with the functional writing. We have so many functional writings. At the end of the day, the national examination is the most important exam, and in that exam you're going to be tested on a single functional writing. Could be 50 from Form 1 to Form 4, 40 something or more than that, but then at the end of the day only one will be tested. So you need to really prepare and know the format of all the functional writings. What are some of the tips on these functional writings? And I'm going to give you the tips. So we have these. You normally see in your paper an F, a C, and an L. That is how the marks are awarded. We have F for format, and the C for content, and the L for your language. You use very good language, you're going to score all the marks that are awarded for the language. So for the format, you should be able to know the format of all the functional writings, be it the letters, be it the emails, be it the recipes, and all the functional writings. If you know the format, sometimes you could end up scoring up to 4, 5, and some 6 marks, like minutes. You can get 6 marks for the correct format. The first key thing, know the correct format of all the functional writings. And then we have the content. For the content, it's how you understand the question. You interpret the question properly, and then you create that content, you write properly, you're going to get a lot of marks in the content. Sometimes could be 10 marks for the content, could be 8 marks for the content. So make sure at least you write something. For example, if you're writing an invitation letter, the content, those details, the venue, the day, the date, the time, very important. They could give you up to 4 marks, and then include maybe you're supposed to give the direction to where they're supposed to come and such kind of things. The details, they give you the marks, and that is what we talk about, the content. And number 3, we have the language. Use the correct spellings, the correct grammar, the correct tenses. You're going to get up to sometimes 6 marks, sometimes 4 marks. Make sure at least if it's out of 4, you can get a 3 or 4 marks. So those are some of the tips. The other thing that has been a challenge in this area is how to differentiate between a question that you're supposed to write 2 functional writings and the one that you're supposed to write 1 functional writing and the 2 in 1. Maybe you are sending a recipe through an email, or maybe you are sending a letter through an email. So I'm going to guide you on how to differentiate between the 3 functional writings. So we're going to begin with the one that has part A and B, which you're supposed to write 2 functional writings. Have a look at that question. Yes, so this is the question that has a part A and part B, which you're supposed to write 2 functional writings. Your cousin has read an advertisement in your local daily newspaper for the position of a library assistant in a public library. He advised you to apply for the job. Write a curriculum vitae for the purpose of applying for the job, 12 marks. B. Assume you have been offered the job as a library assistant. Write a thank you note to your cousin for his good advice. So for a question that you're supposed to write two separate functional writings, this is the tip. You'll have that kind of question, right? You're writing a CV and then you're writing a thank you note. The tip to that, we normally have a part A, 12 marks, and a part B, 8 marks. So if you can see a question with a part A and a part B and the marks have been divided into two, just know you're supposed to write two functional writing. Number 2, we have the other functional writing that most students normally confuse. 2-in-1 functional writing, let me call it that way. Have a look at this question. That is a 2-in-1 question. Assume you have completed your university school education. There is an advertisement in the Kenya News Agency channel, KNA, about diaspora jobs. Write to the Ministry of Labour, that address, Nairobi, to inquire all the necessary details you may require about the jobs and email it to that diaspora jobs at labor.go.ke. In this case, you're not supposed to write two functional writings. You're not supposed to write a letter of inquiry and an email. No. Most of the students will do that. But the thing is, you're supposed to write one. It's a letter, but now we are not going to send that information through the postal office, but we're going to send it through an email. That means for this kind of functional writings, you're going to have the format of an email. Now the content, you pass that message and then you sign up as an email. So we're not going to have like the addresses for the letter and whatever, but the addresses for the email. The last question, the one that is straight to the point and you just required to write one functional. Check this one. You'd want to take your time and differentiate between the three things that we've talked about. The oral skills. The oral skills, the 3A could be a poem or could be a narrative, but last year KCSE we saw neither of the two was tested. It was a speech. So let's check the poetry. What are some of the things that you're supposed to do in this area? And the common mistakes that students do in this area, and they end up being denied a mark. Remember, 1 mark is very important because it can get you to the other grade. So for the poetry, the one mistake that students do, are you told to describe a rhyme scheme, and then you just write this way, A, B, 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 and then you leave it at that point. What you're supposed to do, you're supposed to give the rhyme scheme and say whether it's regular or irregular. So have a look at that small poem. Yes, and comment on the rhyme scheme of this poem. And this is what I came up with, A, B, B. So up to this point you have a mark, and then saying whether it's regular or irregular gives you the other mark. Number 2, we have the issue of the sound patterns and the issue of the rhythm. Identify 2 sound patterns, and then a student will just write, we have alliteration, or maybe we have consonants without illustration. That is a total 0. For anything for sound patterns, for rhythm, you have to give an illustration and properly underline the repeated sound. Have a look at that poem there. So let's assume we were asked to identify a sound pattern or to describe the rhythm of a poem. So identify, maybe alliteration is our sound pattern, or it's how the rhythm has been achieved. We have to illustrate. This is one mark, and then illustrations here of beautiful birds. So you're going to get full marks. But for alliteration only, no mark. If you don't underline properly, like you have underlined like the B and the A, then it's going to confuse the marker and you're going to lose one, or you're going to lose your marks. So be keen as you underline these sound patterns. Over the words to stress in a poem. The words that you're supposed to stress. Which words would you stress in line 5? You're supposed to give all the words that you're supposed to stress and give a reason. Even if you have not been asked to give a reason, ensure you give a reason. And the reason is only one. So the words that we normally stress in a line, we have these categories 4. We have the nouns, we have the verbs, the main verbs, we have the adjectives, and then we have the verbs. If it's a line and you have 2 nouns, an adjective and an adverb, you are going to stress all of them. All of them, I repeat. So don't just, because you have one noun, you're leaving the other noun out. No, stress all of them. They can be 1, 2, 3, or 4. And the reason is 1, because they add meaning to the poem. They give meaning to the poem. It will never change. Assuming this is the line that we, maybe this is line 10, and we have been asked to, which words are we going to stress? Let's do it together. Do not stand at the grave and weep. So which words? Yeah, we have 3. We have stand, which is a verb. We have the grave, and then we have weep. Don't tell us it's a verb or a noun or whatever. No, just identify. We are going to stress stand, grave, and weep. Why? Because they carry the message of the poem, or they add meaning to the poem. How to perform? We can have both verbal and the non-verbal for the performance, but in most cases we use the non-verbal, but it's still okay to use the verbal. How to say a line? You know how you sing something, you're using your voice. Mostly, again, you're going to use the verbal. Like, I'd use the following intonation to show finality, or I'd stress these words and these words, or I'll pause, something of that sort. But also, it's acceptable to use the non-verbal. You can, but mostly try to use the verbal in how to say a line. Apart from that, we have the verbal and the non-verbal cues. You as a student, you should be able to differentiate between the verbal and the non-verbal cues. Have a look at this poem. The sun spun like a tossed coin. It whirled on the azure sky. It clattered into the horizon. It clicked in the slot, and neon light popped, and banked a time expired as an parking meter. Let's check the last question. State and illustrate 3 non-verbal cues that you would use to make the recitation of the above poem more meaningful and interesting. Verbal and non-verbal. Verbal, you're going to use word of mouth. For verbal, we have something like voice projection or audibility. We have proper articulation of words. We have mimicry, you can imitate someone's voice. And then we have the tonal variation. You can use a rising intonation or a falling intonation. Those are verbal. 4. For the non-verbal, you don't use the word of mouth. You just use signs. For example, gestures, we have the facial expressions, we have the body movements, we also have what? And dramatization. You imitate an action. So those are the non-verbal cues. Differentiate between the two. So in answering this question, we are going to focus on the non-verbal cues only. I'll give you one example, and maybe you can give me the other two in the comments. The sun spun like a tossed coin. It whirled on the azure sky. I can point the sky. I'll point the sky. So pointing, I'll use gesture. For instance, point the sky when saying that line. The other part is the narrative, which is examinable. It's an examinable area. And for the narratives, I'm going to be very brief. We can have classification of the narrative. Give the type and illustrate. It's a trickster narrative because the hare tricked the hyena to do this and this. And then you have the features that qualifies the above story to be an oral narrative. For that case, you're supposed to have several. You'd want to check the link in the description for details. If it's an opening formula, long time ago, we have dialogue between the hare and the hyena. Personification, the hyena speaking like human and the hare speaking like human. You have to give an illustration. Without an illustration, it's a 0 mark. And don't number your work. Numbering is not necessary in English papers unless you're writing, it's not making. And then we have capturing the audience. How would you capture the audience before you begin the story? And how do you sustain or make your story interesting as you narrate? This question can be asked this way. What would you do during the presentation to ensure you deliver the story as effectively as possible? For that, you'd want to use the non-verbal and the verbal cues. But then before, you don't use those ones. You can use something like, I would beat a drum, I would clap my hands, I would ring a bell, For details, check the link in the description. Don't just write your answer anyhowly. How would you? So, I would do this and this. So differentiate between those questions when answering the narratives. The silent letters. And the mistake that most of the students do in this area, we have you won't see that. We have, let's say, a B, this one, and this. So we have one a letter and we have one a sound. Differentiate between a letter and a sound. If it's underlining, just underline, but make sure you underline properly. If it's the word honest, I'm going to underline this one. Only the H. But if I underline the H and the O, you're confusing the marker. You might lose 1 mark. We have the receipt. It's the P. Just underline the P. If you can underline the P, make sure you write a letter and not a sound in that matter. Intonation is another area, major examinable area. For the intonation, you can decide to write rising intonation, falling intonation. If you don't know how to use the arrows, just write rising intonation or falling intonation. The mistake that students do, for rising, like you have this, and for falling, you have this. It's wrong. Follow the instruction. If you don't know the arrows, use rising or falling intonation. For example, Jane is an accountant. So statement stick, falling intonation. Just right, falling intonation. Are you traveling tomorrow? Yes, no question. Rising intonation. Make sure you use the correct spellings. Another area, the second last, is the telephone conversation. Have a look at this question. If you're answering any question on telephone conversation and you're supposed to complete those dashes, the blanks, just read the whole conversation before and then after that answer the question, because the conversation down there could give you an idea of what you're supposed to write up there. This conversation: hello, may I talk to Judy, please? Someone might say Judy is not here, but if you go down there, Jane, oh, how are you? How have you been? That statement gives you an idea of what you're supposed to write, and which is, hello to you, Judy speaking. And then Jane says, oh, how are you? How have you been? Someone might say, I've been very fine. I'm doing okay. How about you? But if you read the Jane's response, I'm very sorry, where was the accident? This tells you that that person, Judy, has told Jane that she was involved in an accident. So you could be having something like this. Not very well, I was involved in an accident. And then, I'm very sorry, where was the accident? Maybe you could give the name, but the statement down there, good to hear that your injuries were not serious. So, the response could be something like, it happened along the Moy South Lake Road near Lake Naivasha, but the injuries were minor. And then, good to hear that your injuries were not too serious. You will pull through. Judy says, thank you. Read fast before you answer. A bonus question. For each of the following words, write 2 sentences to bring out 2 different meanings. Tie, soil, can. For this kind of question, don't conjugate. If you put it like tied, it becomes wrong. Stress in verbs and stress in noun. Like you can have tie as a noun. Can you tie my shoe? Can you help me tie my shoe? Where did you buy your tie? You see, ties in that case is a noun. And could you please help me to tie my shoe? That is a verb. Soil. Well, the teacher asked me to bring some soil. Soil is a noun. If you leave the boy alone, you leave the baby alone, they will soil their clothes. You see, that one is a verb. Don't conjugate it. Don't conjugate it. Put it in the same form. And finally, we have this one for the stress again. Yeah, that one, you normally come across it most of the time. Mary bought a present for John. Mary bought a present for John. Mary bought a present for John. And Mary is stressed, both is stressed, and John is stressed. So what do they mean? Emphasis lies on the stressed word, which means it's that word and nothing else. For the first sentence, we're going to have, it means it's Mary and not any other person that bought a present for John. Number 2, Mary only bought a present for John, not any other action. Number 3, emphasis is on John. So Mary bought a present for John and not any other person. So guys, that is the end of our session today. Thank you so much for watching. In case you have any question, reach me on the comments. Thank you. Bye for now.